The sea was black glass the night they arrived. One long, silent mirror that made my house feel like a ship no one else could see. By morning, their shadows were everywhere, and the light in my kitchen belonged to people who hadn't invited me to Thanksgiving in 8 years. On the 8th Thanksgiving, I left the table set for 2. I don't know why I did that. Habit, maybe. Hope, probably. I watched the last ferry slip across Lake Washington and let the oaks in the yard throw their long, skeletal arms over the lawn. By the time the turkey cooled, my son had posted a photo from Atlanta. Crystal stemware, his wife's parents, a golden retriever in an orange bandana. There was room for a dog, but not for me. The first year, their excuse had been simple. Her parents have a tiny townhouse, Mom. It's cozy. The second was an illness. The third, just immediate family. After that, it stopped being a question and became a pattern. I learned to buy myself nice wine and stop checking my phone. I learned to walk the boardwalk at Leshy Park until my calves burned. I learned to pretend I hadn't bankrolled their condo in Buckhead, or the Tesla, or the Santorini trip that bloomed all over their grid. I am 63. My name is Evelyn Hart. My husband, Raymond, died on a Tuesday while the Mariners were losing in extra innings. I remember the commentator's voice like a prayer I didn't believe in. I own a cedar and glass place on the water in Seattle. 2 stories, 6 bedrooms, a kitchen with a view that can make your heart ache if you let it. I built a small surgical staffing company, sold it for a sum that turned into more than just security. It became something that made other people expect things from me. Money does that. It pulls everyone's compass a few degrees off true. 3 months after I stopped texting, stopped wiring, just a little help, stopped playing their backup plan, my gate cam flashed blue and white at 7:12 a.m. There they were, framed in winter light. My son, Nathan, in a jacket I'd given him 3 birthdays ago, and his wife, Sloane, all angles and gloss. A suitcase that probably had more stamps than I do. 2 rideshare drivers wrestled their luggage up the stone steps like this was a hotel, and I was the concierge. "Mom," Nathan said, smiling with the shy guilt of a boy who'd broken a window. Surprise. Sloane leaned in and kissed the air near my cheek. "We came to be with you. It's not right you rattling around in this big house." She kicked her heel against the step to free a pebble. "And we're moving to Seattle. Isn't that perfect?" There's a particular ring to certain kinds of kindness. It's bright, and it hurts the ears if you listen too long. "Moving," I repeated, fingers resting on the iron of the gate. "How long?" "Let's not put a clock on, love," Sloane said. "We sold the condo. Atlanta's gotten so performative." She widened her eyes as if confiding. "We're craving authenticity." I buzzed them in because I was raised to offer people shelter before I offered them questions. But the questions came anyway, crowding in behind them as the door shut and the house took on their scent. Amber, leather, something expensive trying to cover something sour. Within 20 minutes, Sloane had opened the built-ins in the living room and rearranged the books by color. She ran a hand over the velvet on my blue sofa and said, almost to herself, "We'll need to update." She stood at the base of the stairs and tipped her chin up toward my bedroom at the end of the hall, like a hawk noting a shiny thing. "We'll take the primary," she said, smiling. "Nathan snores. You'll want peace." Nathan looked at the floor. "It's more practical." The primary is where I pressed my forehead to Raymond's shoulder the night before his surgery and promised I'd be brave. It's where he taught me to 2-step to a scratchy Otis Redding record when the power went out in that January storm, and we lit candles all over the house. It's where he died. Practicality is a bitter word when it's used like a crowbar. "No," I said. My voice surprised all of us. Calm, iron, the voice I used in boardrooms when men 20 years younger explained payroll to me. You can take the West Guest Suite. Sloane's smile tightened at the corners, and that, more than anything she said next, told me what I needed to know. Of course, she said. We'll make it work. My housekeeper, Marisol, arrived at 9 and froze when she saw them in the hallway, like a deer measuring distance. Sloane waved brightly and introduced herself as if she hadn't been at my Christmas brunch 3 years straight. By noon, she'd given Marisol a list of small improvements. No food outside, anti-hygienic, linens to be changed every other day. We run warm. Coffee set to brew at 6:30 a.m. We're early birds. I watched Marisol fold the list and tuck it into her apron the way you tuck a splinter into your finger to deal with later. At dinner, Sloane put her hand on mine. Her nails were the pale white pink of expensive French milk glass. Evelyn, she said, we need to talk about your support system. Do we? You mixed up salt and sugar at breakfast, she said gently. It's normal. After 60, executive function starts to... I didn't make breakfast, I said. Nathan did. Sloane blinked. Nathan took a sip of water and stared at the condensation sliding down the glass like it had something to say. It's a lot to manage, he said. This house, finances. We can help. I looked at the 2 people who had declared me too big for my own home and too small for my own life, and I smiled in a way that made my cheeks ache. By all means, I said. Help. I kept the master. I locked my office. I didn't sleep. Around midnight, I stood at the window and watched my own reflection in the black water. My heart was a metronome. My breath left fog on the glass. I thought of 8 years of empty places, of wiring money into a vacuum that didn't even echo back, of the way hope can make you stupid if you don't root it in something heavier. Somewhere around 1, the boat lights flicked on the far side of the lake, and I decided something important. If they'd come to run a con on me, they'd knocked on the wrong door. At the foot of my bed, a pair of black heels gleamed like beetles. Sloane's. She'd left them by accident, as if the house belonged to her, and accidents were a test of allegiance. I took them to the laundry room and set them on the top shelf where the detergent lives. It felt strange, petty, necessary. I slept for 2 hours and woke with the taste of something metallic in my mouth and a plan forming like frost on glass. If love is a muscle, mine had gotten good at holding weight. It was about to learn how to let go. And if you're hearing this, if my voice landed in your kitchen, or your car, or at the end of a long second shift, tell me where in the world you are. Drop your city in the comments. If this made you feel anything at all, tap like. If you want more stories that hurt and heal in the same breath, subscribe. I'll be here, on this stupidly beautiful lake, telling the truth the way I wish someone had told it to me. Sloane marked her territory with rules, not the kind you say, the kind you enact like choreography. No shoes by the door became a row of their sneakers where my boots had lived. Breakfast together became a summons at 6:31 a.m. Precise, the coffee stronger than I like, and a chalkboard of tasks positioned like a prayer wheel near the pantry. Day 3, she told Marisol that the terrace was unsanitary for meals, and that we would use the dining room only. The dining room faces the water, but Sloane closed the drapes to preserve the upholstery. The room shrank to the size of a courtroom. She put the blue plates in a cabinet and replaced them with white ones. White plates make you eat less, she said. Portion control is key at our age. Our age. She is 31. That afternoon I found her in my office flipping through files she did not read so much as weigh. She held a letter from Raymond in both hands, the paper thin with rereadings. You keep a lot of old stuff, she said. Memories, I said, taking the letter back. They don't go to Goodwill. Organization is love, she said cheerfully. Clutter is a symptom. What's it a symptom of? She smiled, not being ready for help. When she left, I checked the bottom drawer. My living trust binder was there. My power of attorney paperwork. Unsigned. The old will with the ink that still looked wet because it mattered so much when we made it. Nothing was missing. Yet. Terrell, my driver, knocked on my office door the next morning as soon as he heard Nathan's car leave. He wore his cap in his hands like he was about to walk into church and ask for a favor he wasn't sure he deserved. "Miss Hart?" he said. "You got a minute?" "My house always has a minute for you," I said, and meant it. He cleared his throat. "I took Mr. Nathan to a law office yesterday. They told me to wait in the garage. Door was open. I heard his voice, and the lawyer, a woman, short hair, name like Barker. She said something about guardianship, conservatorship. She said with the right documentation, the court could move fast. He asked about your house, about liquidating. The air left my lungs like a curtain being pulled. "You're sure?" Terrell nodded, eyes steady. He's the kind of man you trust when the boat lists. "There's more. They stopped at a clinic after. Evergreen Neurology. He joked about his forgetful mama in the elevator." I sat so fast my knees banged the desk. "Thank you," I said, "because those are two of the most important words on earth." "Thank you for telling me." He hesitated. "Do you want me to quit?" They said my services were unnecessary. Too expensive for a house with older residents. My laugh had a crack down the middle. "Absolutely not. I want you on the payroll and on standby. And Terrell, from now on, texts only. No calls." After he left, I opened my laptop and tried to remember every lawyer I'd ever trusted. The list is short when you've spent your life smiling while men tell you you're being emotional about the money you earned. I called Janelle Park, who'd got me through the sale of the company with all the dignity and none of the leaks. She answered on the second ring. "Evelyn, you only call when something's on fire." "It is," I said. "And I think they're holding a can of gasoline." Janelle listened like she was building a case, one breath at a time. She asked names, dates, times. She asked for the clinic's address. She asked if my doctor could run a cognitive panel for baseline. "We're going to shut this down at the neck," she said. "Quietly if possible, publicly if necessary." I texted Dr. Romero. He's been my physician 15 years. The kind of doctor who looks you in the eye before he looks at the chart. He called back and told me to come by at 5. "Bring no one," he said. "You sound sober." It made me laugh. I needed the laugh. For days I let Sloane play general. She updated my pantry and threatened my gardener's job like it was a hobby. She cooed to Nathan about my spells. She told me she'd ordered a memory supplement she'd seen on a podcast. I started taking tea only when I brewed it myself. The metallic taste crept in anyway. I watched her test boundaries like a pickpocket learning a mark. "What's your online banking password?" she asked at breakfast, the question tossed like a glove on the table among the berries she'd set out like props. "You're adorable," I said. "No." The fourth night, I found a gray folder half hidden beneath a sweater in the west guest room closet. It wasn't even original. King County Superior Court. Emergency petition for guardianship. I sat on their bed and read the draft. Respondent: Evelyn May Hart. Symptoms: confusion, agitation, risky financial behavior. The signature line had a name: Dr. Avery Klein, MD, Evergreen Neurology. The evaluation letter was attached. It was a masterpiece of erasure, small lies stitched together to look like a diagnosis. Patient unable to recall the year. Patient mixed up names of close family. Patient left the stove on twice. I pressed the paper to my face and inhaled as if I might breathe in the truth and secrete it like antidote. My hands shook. My hands stopped. I took photos. I put everything back exactly where I found it and closed the closet door quietly, the way you leave a sleeping animal be. At 5, Dr. Romero tapped my knees with his little rubber hammer and asked me to draw a clock. "I know the game," I said, and drew a clock with the hands set to 7:12. He smiled. "Why that time?" "It's when my son arrived," I said. "The day I needed to remember how it felt." He took blood. He ordered a tox screen. He made a note to request Evergreen Neurology's credentials. "I know, Klein," he said softly. "The license is complicated." He didn't say expired. He didn't have to. At home, I swapped the sugar bowl. I put a tiny cam in the pantry window that faces the sink. I told Marisol to speak to me only in Spanish in the house for the next week. Sloane detested being left out of even a grocery list. I called Nadia Patel at the King County Prosecutor's office, a friend of a friend who still sends me funny cards on my birthday. I told her only that I needed her to listen. She did. That night, over salmon Sloane had overcooked and blamed on the antiquated range, she produced a pen from her blazer and slid a single page across the table. "Durable power of attorney," she said brightly. "Just until you're feeling more yourself. So we can protect you." Nathan did not look up as he said, "It's for the best, Mom." There was salt on my tongue. I couldn't tell if it was from the fish or my own mouth watering for the fight. I capped the pen. "No." Sloane's smile did not falter. "You're emotional. We can revisit when you're regulated." I smiled back. "You have no idea." The morning after the pen hit the table, Sloane introduced family council at 6:30 a.m. The chalkboard schedule bloomed with arrows. Walks became fall risk mitigation. Groceries became nutritional overhaul. She used words like "we" and "our" the way you use Lysol. Nathan wore his old high school hoodie and that made it worse. It wasn't innocence. It was camouflage. He had always wanted to be the nice guy even when he was being cruel. When he was 13 and I was picking up an extra shift to afford his travel baseball team, he'd gone to his room and cried into his pillow so he wouldn't hurt my feelings. When he was 20, he told me I didn't have to come to Parents' Weekend because it's mostly for freshmen. He made cruelty sound like favor. Sloane made it sound like logic. Together they were a weather system. I did what I've always done. I made a list. Secure the house. Build a paper wall between me and them. Gather the truth. Time the reveal. By noon, I had a locksmith rekey the office and the safe. Sloane pouted theatrically when she tried the handle and it didn't give. "Transparency is healthy," she said. "So are locks," I said. At 1, Janelle parked in the cul-de-sac and came through the side gate like a thief. We sat in the greenhouse among the lemon trees while December tried to be kind and failed. I signed a new trust instrument that moved my assets into an irrevocable trust with a trustee who does not care about my dinners or my holidays. Janelle filed a notice with the court that any guardianship petition would be contested and requested that all medical evaluations be court-appointed. Her pen scratched like a match being drawn along a strip. "Evergreen Neurology?" she said. "We'll see if they even exist long enough to receive a subpoena. Dr. Romero thinks the license is off." She arched an eyebrow. "Klein's had disciplinary notes before. We'll pull the file." I gave her the photos of the folder and the draft petition. "They're sloppy," she said. "Thank God." I texted Nadia just the word, "greenhouse." 15 minutes later, she was there, wind in her hair and a carton of soup under her arm. "You look like jail time," she said matter-of-factly, and kissed my cheek. We talked about elder fraud, and domestic interference, and a dozen other phrases that felt obscene when applied to my son. We talked about zolpidem and benzodiazepines, and how tiny doses in tea can fog a person enough to record confusion on an iPhone. Nadia took the cam footage from my pantry window, the close-up of a manicured hand-tipping powder into a mug with steam, curling like a secret. "Chain of custody," she said, and bagged it like treasure. At Dr. Romero's office, my labs came back. "Clean," he said. "But there were traces last week consistent with Z drugs. It's out of your system now. I noted it. Date stamped, independent lab." He tapped the side of his monitor. "Evergreen Neurology is barely paper. Klein's license is suspended pending review. The clinic is a suite with a temp receptionist shared by a medical billing outfit. Someone is playing doctor with a dead stethoscope. I had Terrell drive me to a notary I trust and signed a declaration outlining the last 7 days. The incidents, the words, the document. I attached photos. I called my security company and asked for 7 days of internal footage. Sloane had accidentally disabled the foyer cam. The pantry one she didn't know about gave me everything I needed. Hands, nails, labels, angles. It's always the little camera you forget that tells the truth. On the way home, Terrell slowed the SUV for a 4-way. A woman pushing a stroller waved us through. The baby was wearing a hat that looked like a bear. There was a tiny, human weight to the moment that brought something sharp and clean into my chest. I felt the loss of 8 Thanksgivings like a bruise someone pressed and said, "Still tender?" At dinner, I let them talk. It was like sitting in a meeting where you know the outcome and watching people perform their parts anyway. Sloane floated the idea of a trial stay at a residential wellness community. It was a small mercy that she couldn't bring herself to say, "facility." Nathan called it a reset. They used euphemisms like hand cream, liberal application, no measurable effect. I asked for my salt. Sloane passed the canister with a little flourish. She had replaced the ceramic with glass. The salt shimmered like ground snow, innocent, eager. I unscrewed the top and poured a small pile onto my palm. It glittered. I put a grain on my tongue. Salt tastes like the ocean in the back of your hand. This tasted like nothing. In a blind, you wouldn't know you were being stolen. I set the canister down and excused myself with my napkin folded carefully, the way you would leave a note on a grave if you still believed in notes. In my office, I made one more call. Not to a lawyer, not to a doctor. To a woman named Christine North whose name lived in a little black book I don't bring out unless everything else has failed. Christine runs a private investigations firm in Tacoma, and once found a CFO's second bank account in Belize by noticing a logged-in tab during a Zoom share. She answers unknown numbers because unknown numbers have made her mortgage. "I need a background," I said. "Fast." "Spell it," she said, and I did. "That last name?" she said when I finished. "You sure?" "I'm sure of nothing," I said, "except that she's here." Christine whistled low. "I'll call you when I have smoke." I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of the primary, that square of home that not even grief could kill. I looked at the old box on the shelf where Raymond's coins live, the ones he'd rub with his thumb when he needed to feel lucky. I picked one up, a dull copper penny, 1974, and pressed it into my palm until it left an imprint. "You always said I was the meanest nice person you knew." I whispered toward the ceiling where we once lay and counted the wood knots when we couldn't sleep. "Turns out, Ray, I'm mean enough." Christine called at 6:04 a.m. "You're early," I said. "Trouble doesn't sleep," she said. "You got coffee?" "Yes." "You'll want it." Papers shuffled, keys clicked. Sloane Whitaker is an echo. The social is clean. The driver's license is real. But before Sloane, there was a Lydia North in Arizona. Change of name 3 years ago after a civil settlement she didn't contest, because the plaintiff died mid-proceeding. I sat at the breakfast bar and watched the lake smolder gray under a ceiling of cloud. Go on. Lydia married a man in Scottsdale 15 years her senior. Real estate investor. He had a heart attack at 49. No history, no autopsy. Life insurance paid out to the widow. Lydia sold the house within 90 days. Moved to Tampa. New circles. New money. Married an older widower with a yacht and a vitamin D deficiency. He died in a boating accident 2 miles off Clearwater Beach. Too much bourbon, they said. The boat sank. The widow sold the marina slip and moved north. I put my coffee down. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Criminal? Nothing that stuck. But 2 states have open files for elderly financial exploitation tied to a woman with her build and a taste for names that rhyme with summer. Summer? I said. Sloan. Close enough for lazy men with clipboards, Christine said. Also, she got popped in Vegas for defrauding a 78-year-old at a craps table. Lucky charm fee. Pled it down. Paid a fine. Got expunged. My teeth hurt. I hadn't realized I was clenching my jaw. Thank you. One more, Christine said. Your son's email was sloppy on an old shared iPad. Their plans are there like a script. I'm sending you screenshots. And Evelyn? You're not crazy. You're careful. There's a difference. I downloaded the files in my office with the door locked, my breath shallow and mean. There they were. Messages back and forth about guardianship timeline, liquidation strategy. A line of text from Nathan that made me nauseous because I could hear him saying it in that careful, nice boy voice. Maybe it's better if we do this quick, so she doesn't suffer. Sloan replied. We are the only ones who actually care enough to do what's necessary. I set my phone on the wood and let myself cry for exactly 49 seconds. Because that was as long as it would take me to lose something and find something else. Then I wiped my eyes, put on lipstick, and went downstairs to the kitchen where Sloan was slicing strawberries carefully so they looked like flowers. You're up early, she said. So are you, I said. Discipline is freedom, she said. You'll get on my schedule. It'll help the mood swings. Will it? I said, and smiled. She narrowed her eyes at my mouth, and I knew she saw what I wanted her to see. A woman still playing their game. That afternoon, Janelle sent over a courier with 3 documents. A temporary protective filing that put a hold on any attempt to transfer title to my home, a cease and desist letter addressed to any physician or clinic producing unauthorized evaluation reports, and a notice to Sloan and Nathan, unsigned, that I kept in my pocket like a talisman. It said simply, "You are not my agent. You do not speak for me." It felt better than a prayer. At 5, Dr. Romero texted. Cognitive panel, normal. Tox, trace zolpidem last week, reporting completed. He attached a formal letter with his letterhead and his neat, precise signature. Also, Evergreen Neurology not recognized by state. Klein suspended 2023. Sloan's schedule said family dinner at 6. She made a whole chicken and posted a photo of it before we ate. Nourish the ones you love. She carved like she was auditioning for an ad. Halfway through, Nathan cleared his throat. Mom, he said, laying a document on the table like a bouquet. This is temporary, just to keep things in place while you deteriorate, I said. He flinched. While you're under stress, and for bills. We're good at logistics. Sloan slid a pen toward me. Sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen and held it as a weight. I let silence inflate and stretch until it came close to bursting. Then I looked up at my child. The person I'd worked double shifts for. The person I'd wrapped in a damp towel when he cried over a girl at 17. The person whose first car had been a dented Civic I bought in cash and repainted blue. And I told the truth. I know about Scottsdale, I said quietly. and Tampa, and Vegas, and Evergreen Neurology's suspended license. Sloane's hand stilled. A strawberry dropped to the plate like a soft little injury. Nathan laughed in a dry way I'd never heard before. "Mom, I know about the iPad," I said, "and the plan, and the powder in my tea." He went white, then red. You don't understand." "Say that again," I said softly. "Tell me what I don't understand about my own life." Sloane adjusted the napkin in her lap as if the fabric could change the physics of the room. "Evelyn," she said, "you're lashing out." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I learned that from watching you." I stood, slow and steady, and put both hands flat on the table like I might tip it. "Do you know what I do understand? I understand love, the kind that makes your ribs ache. And I understand theft, the kind that doesn't leave fingerprints because it smiles while it works." I pulled Dr. Romero's letter from my cardigan and set it among the plates. "I also understand receipts." Sloane's eyes flicked over the letter, found the words she didn't want, and slid to the side, like oil. "Anyone can write a letter. And anyone can go to jail," I said, and the room went very quiet. The thing about people like Sloane is they believe in momentum. If they keep talking, if they keep smiling, the room will lean the way they need it to. That night, her smile didn't catch. It slid off the conversation like rain off a waxed hood. She tried logic. "Evelyn, you're alone here. It's not safe." She tried concern. "You forgot my name yesterday." I looked at her and said, "I didn't forget. I chose not to use it." She tried threat finally. "The court will see reason." "Which court?" I asked. "The one that just received a notice to contest your emergency petition, or the one that will receive a complaint regarding Evergreen?" Nathan put his head in his hands and said my name like it was a swear. "Mom." I slid a small black recorder across the table and pressed play. Their voices filled the room with an intimacy that would have broken me once, and now made me almost grateful. Because there is nothing kinder, sometimes, than a truth told in the voice of the person who wanted to hide it. "Nathan, maybe it's better if we do this quick. Sloane, we are the only ones who care enough to do what's necessary. Nathan, she won't sign. Sloane, then we take it to court. We have a doctor. We have incidents." I paused and looked at Sloane. "You forgot to delete your messages on my old iPad." She went very still. Stillness can be fight too. I pulled a clear bag from my pocket. Inside was a small amber bottle with a pharmacy label. Zolpidem. Her name. "Found this in your tote after you left it in the foyer," I said. "Security footage shows you pouring powder into my tea. Dr. Romero's lab shows traces in my blood last week. This is called a felony when it's deployed to manufacture incompetence." Sloane's chair scraped an inch backward. "You planted that." "Did I plant your fingerprints too?" I said. "Because that would be a magic trick I'd sell to Vegas." Nathan's voice got small. "Why are you doing this?" "Why are you?" I asked, and something in him broke and he shrugged. A little boy gesture that made me want to put my head down on the table and sleep for a year. "We were drowning," he said. "The condo. You sold the condo," I said. "The market dipped," he said. "Then perhaps," I said gently, because sometimes the kindest thing is the clean cut. "You shouldn't have bought a condo on a peak." Sloane's mask slid another inch. "We are trying to help you," she said, and the words rang hollow even to her ears. "Stop," I said. "No more lies. You wanted the house. You wanted the accounts. You wanted an old woman you could put in a residential wellness community, like a dog at a nice kennel." Sloane's eyes flashed. "You think you can prove any of this?" "Some of it," I said. Enough of it. And the rest? The rest I can make a room believe. The doorbell rang. Sloane flinched. Nathan jerked his head like a deer hearing a twig snap. It was the sound I wanted. It was the sound that separated pretense from consequence. I let the bell ring twice more. Then I said, "We're done pretending this is a conversation. From here on, it's a negotiation." "Who is that?" Nathan asked. "Someone with a badge," I said. It wasn't entirely true. Nadia did not wear a badge, but she had brought people who did. Sloane stood too quickly. Her knee hit the table. A fork clattered to the floor. We all looked at it because sometimes your eyes need a small thing to focus on when a large thing is moving in. "Sit," I said and used my boardroom voice again. "One last thing before we open that door." Sloane swallowed. "What thing?" I leaned over the table until we were face to face and lowered my voice to a whisper that belonged to every woman who has ever been underestimated. These 3 words. She tried to laugh and failed. "What?" "You'll remember them," I said. "They'll be the last thing you hear in this house." She stared, her pupils 2 coins. "Say it." "After," I said, and nodded toward the hall. "After you sign something of mine." The front hall in my house is long and narrow, a bowling lane in walnut with a runner down the middle. When the door opens, the lake wind pushes through like a guest. That night, it carried rain and badge leather and the low murmur of people who have practiced saying their names and their departments 1,000 times. Nadia stood just behind 2 detectives from financial crimes. She wore a navy coat and no smile. The taller detective introduced himself, then asked politely if we could talk in the dining room. It felt like a TV show I'd never wanted to be cast in. Sloane's posture said cooperation, but her eyes said escape. Nathan stood behind her as if her spine might give him one. Nobody sat. "We're not here to arrest anyone tonight," the detective said, and I could feel Sloane's shoulders drop half an inch at the word tonight. "We're here because a report was filed alleging attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." "I'm not vulnerable," I snapped, and Nadia's eyes flicked to mine. Gentle, apologetic, as if to say I know. Words are imperfect. "It's a category," the detective said, "not a judgment." He asked questions, dates, names. Did I recognize this bottle? This document? Was this my signature? Did I understand the behaviors described here? Did I have a letter from a physician? I did. He took copies. He took the backed bottle. He complimented the security camera angle, and I said, "Thank you, because I'm polite, even when I'm bleeding." Then he looked at Nathan. "Sir, were you present when your wife prepared Miss Hart's tea on Tuesday?" "Sometimes we make tea," Nathan said. It wasn't an answer. It was a dodge. He had learned it from me. I wanted to shake him and hold him at the same time. Sloane said nothing. Silence is a sentence. "Ms. Whitaker," the detective said. "Do you know Dr. Avery Klein?" "I don't recall," she said, and the room actually laughed. A little bitter sound that wasn't kind. She heard it and flushed. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "We are family. We are trying to help her." Nadia leaned against the entryway trim. "Help is signing your name on your own bills and not signing it on someone else's," she said. "Help is not moving into a house and naming the rooms." Sloane looked at me the way a cat looks at a door, convinced it will open if it stares long enough. "Evelyn," she said, "talk to them." "I am," I said. "And now, as promised, it's time." "For what?" she asked, voice rice paper thin. "For my words." The room stilled. I could feel my heart like a small animal in my throat, breathing fast and fierce. I stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny flake of mascara beneath her left eye. "They found arsenic," I said. 3 words. Simple, heavy as a hammer. It hit her like a wave. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Her hand went to her throat as if the room had tilted. She took 1 step back and would have fallen if Nathan hadn't grabbed her elbow. He looked at me over her head, something like horror and recognition in his face. "From where?" he whispered, because men always want the provenance of the thing that kills them. "From Clearwater," I said softly. "Florida. Old case, new interest. Christine found a box. Nadia found a friend. Someone found a little soil that kept a secret too long. I did not tell them about the lab tech who cried after she called Nadia. I did not tell them about the emails I had written to people who lost brothers 15 years ago and never got a good answer. I did not tell them about the slow, methodical mercy of a reopened file." Sloane sagged into the dining chair and pressed her palms to her cheeks. For the first time since they arrived, she looked her age. 31 is young to run out of lies. I put a stack of papers on the table. "These are my conditions," I said, "because that's how you take back a room. You will leave my house tonight. You will not contact me directly. All communications go through counsel. You will not attempt to access any account, property, or service in my name. Nathan, you will sign a notarized acknowledgement that you participated in the attempt to secure guardianship and that you withdraw your petition. Sloane, you will surrender your passport pending investigation." Nadia cleared her throat. "The last one we can make a request on. Not a demand. Yet." "Then it's a request," I said. Nathan's voice broke. "Mom, please." "You called me Mom when you needed me to sign car titles," I said. "You called me Evelyn when you needed me to sign away my life. Pick a lane." He put his hand over his face and sobbed like he was 12. I felt something in me soften, the way a scar softens in hot water, but not enough to change the facts. Sloane's chair scratched against the floor as she stood. She pressed her lips together and something ugly flickered across her face. Hatred, contempt, fear, all braided and shining. "You can't prove any of this," she said. But she didn't believe herself anymore, and that was a mercy. "Maybe not," I said. "Maybe not all of it. But I can prove enough." She looked at Nathan, not for love, but for strategy. He looked at her, not for strategy, but for permission. It was hard to watch. I looked away. The detectives took statements. Nadia made a call. The rain hit the window in hard, clean lines. It felt like the lake was clapping. They left with 2 duffels and a plastic tote that held less than they brought. The rest of the luggage sat in the foyer like a small, failed invasion force. The detectives escorted them to the curb. Nadia squeezed my shoulder. Sloane kept her head down, a scarf covering her mouth. Nathan looked at me like a boy waking up on a bus and realizing he missed his stop. After the taillights burned out into the rain, the house exhaled. Houses do that, you know. They hold your breath while you fight, and then give it back when you survive. Marisol came out from the kitchen with a dish towel clutched in her hands. "Yeah?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said, and pulled her into a hug that smelled like lemon and starch and something safe. Terrell texted from the end of the drive. "All clear." I sent him a heart and meant it. I poured a glass of wine and took it to the window. The lake was an onyx slab. The neighbor's dock light made a little halo that moved when the water moved. For the first time in a month, my shoulders went soft. When the adrenaline burned off, grief arrived, patient and hot. It's a cliché to say grief comes in waves, but clichés get born because they're true. The first wave knocked me to my knees. I crawled to the sofa and pressed my face into the cushion where Raymond's aftershave still lives. if I go looking for it on some sentimental nights. Ray, I said, and then I said nothing for a long time. In the morning, sunlight came in thin Brave sheets. I made eggs with too much butter. I ate them at the counter and read Janelle's email twice. Temporary protective order entered. Guardianship petition withdrawn per Nathan's acknowledgement. TRO hearing set for next week. Come ready? Separate civil remedies available for restitution on funds previously given under false pretenses. We'll talk strategy. Christine texted. Florida detective says thank you. He'd like a call later. Reopen looks good. I sent a thank you to Terrell and doubled his holiday bonus. I told Marisol to order the blue plates back out. We opened the drapes in the dining room, and the light returned like a dog from under the bed. Nathan called at 11:03 a.m. I let it ring out. He texted. Then he wrote an email, and I read it slowly because I owed him that. It was half apology, half explanation, all bruise. He used words like overwhelmed and fog and pressure. He said Sloan was compelling. He said he wanted to make me proud. He said, in a line that made me grit my teeth, that the condo market was unforgiving. He did not say, I'm sorry I tried to steal your life. I wrote back 3 sentences. I am not your bank. I am not your enemy. I am your mother when you behave like my son. It felt like writing on a whiteboard with a shaky hand. Nadia came by with takeout from the Thai place on Rainier. We ate noodles out of paper boxes on the floor of my office like college kids. You handled that like a CEO, not a victim, she said. I've been both, I said. I know which one gets better results. You know they'll spin, she said. Sloan will cry. Nathan will minimize. People will line up to call you dramatic. Let them, I said. I'm too old to volunteer for fires. She smiled into her noodles. You're going to make a terrifying old lady. Promise? I said. The TRO hearing came quick. The courtroom smelled like old air and cheap carpet cleaner. The judge wore tired well. His eyes were kind enough. Janelle did the talking. She's better at performing anger in a way that doesn't sound like anger. She set out the timeline, the recordings, the bottle, the lab, Dr. Romero's letter. The other side had a lawyer who kept smoothing his hair like it might help. He called me confused and precipitous. He called Sloan misunderstood. The judge didn't call anyone anything. He read. He asked me 2 questions in a voice that could have been a lullaby, if not for the content. Do you feel safe? And do you want these orders? I said no and yes, respectively, and he nodded like a man at a diner ordering black coffee before sunrise. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like donuts and bus exhaust. I held the paper in my hands and tried not to shake. Janelle tucked it into a file. You did good, she said, and it sounded like a grade school teacher and a general all at once. That afternoon, someone left flowers on my porch, lilies and eucalyptus. The card was unsigned. I knew who it was. People say sorry and flowers when they can't form the syllables. I began the slow work of reclaiming the house from their fingerprints. We put the blue plates back. We opened the drapes. We put the salt back in the ceramic jar that Raymond once called the soft white. We put the pan with the scratched nonstick out by the curb because Sloan had ruined it on purpose, and I didn't need that symbol in my kitchen anymore. At night, I made a list. Not the kind with bullets and deadlines. The kind that reminds you who you are. I'm not invisible. I'm not crazy. I'm not kind at the expense of the truth. I'm not done. Thanksgiving is a geometry of absence. You set the table around what's not there. This year I set 6 places and invited people who'd stood between me and the dock. Marisol and her husband, Terrell and his daughter, Nadia, and Janelle, who insisted she could cook exactly 2 things and proved it. The turkey came out passable. The mashed potatoes had lumps. The gravy was a miracle. We went around the table and said what we were grateful for, and nobody said money, though I thought it. Midway through dessert, my phone buzzed with a Florida area code. I excused myself and stood in the laundry room among the neat smells. The detective on the other end had a voice like gravel and honey. "Ms. Hart," he said, "we appreciate the box. Looks like a can of worms in there. We can't promise anything, but we can promise attention." "Attention," I said. "Sometimes that's bigger than justice." "Sometimes it's a start," he said. Back at the table, Nadia asked for seconds of the pie, and Janelle scooped with a generosity that made me want to adopt her. Terrell's daughter, Ava, asked if she could feed the ducks, and I said yes, because I want there to be at least one person who associates this house with nothing but birds and sugar and safe. Later, after the dishes and the papers and the hushed talk of strategy for the civil claim, Janelle had numbers I didn't like and paths I did, after the house got quiet and the lake lay down like an obedient dog. Nathan texted again. "I need to see you," he wrote. "Alone." I stared at the words until they lost their shapes. I wrote back, "Not yet." He called 5 times. I silenced my phone and listened to the refrigerator hum, an old, reliable sound. The next day, a bench warrant appeared in a Nevada database with Sloane's maiden name attached. Nadia texted me a screenshot with a single word: momentum. It wasn't the kind of thing you frame, but I put it in a folder on my desktop that I titled Light. On Sunday, I walked the path along the water and tried to remember my body. I counted my steps and the seagulls and the number of times I'd forgiven Nathan when he didn't ask. I tried to remember the moment he became a man who could become this. Was it 1,000 small surrenders? Or one big one? Did I train him to believe I would pay? Did I teach him that love and money were interchangeable because I was so afraid he would feel poor that I gave him abundance like medicine? On Monday, I went through old boxes. Photographs of Nathan with scraped knees and sunburnt nose. Raymond mid-grin at a barbecue with a beer in one hand and a spatula in the other. Me in a cheap suit with shoulder pads big enough to land planes on. I cried again, but this cry was quieter. Age has taught me how to cry without wrecking the room. Tuesday, a letter arrived. Handwritten, stamped, addressed in Nathan's careful block print. He always had neat letters. Inside, 3 pages, both sides, apologies folded into justifications. He said Sloane had a way of making everything feel inevitable. He said I had conditioned him to depend on me. He said he was ashamed. He said he didn't know who he was without us telling him. He said he was leaving her. He said he loved me. I made tea and read it twice. I put it on the table and stared out at the lake until it stopped being a lake and became a color. Then I wrote back, slowly. "Nathan," I wrote. "Shame is only useful if it points to change. I believe you can change. I also believe love without boundaries is not love. If you want to see me, you'll meet me with Janelle present. We will talk about restitution, therapy, and time. We will not talk about forgiveness like it's a coupon that expires. I am your mother. That will not save you from the consequences." I signed it Mom, and felt the words sit properly in my chest for the first time in months. We met in Janelle's conference room, which managed to be both welcoming and terrifying. A bowl of good almonds on the table, and a view of the courthouse that made lying a bad idea. Nathan came alone. He looked 10 pounds lighter and 20 years older. He held his hands together like he was praying to something he didn't believe in. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi," I said. I didn't offer a hug. He didn't expect one. That felt like growth and loss in equal measure. Janelle laid out the agenda like a teacher. Restitution schedule, therapy requirement, no contact provisions with Sloane, acknowledgement of the guardianship attempt and the harm caused. Nathan signed. He asked if he could read his letter aloud. Janelle nodded. He read. His voice shook, but did not break. He said words I never expected to hear. "I have been entitled," he said, and I almost laughed because he used the tone he used in 10th grade English when he read essays he wanted me to praise. "I believed your love looked like safety. I let Sloane define safety as control. I am ashamed of what I did to you. I'm ashamed of what I became next to her." "Next to you," I said. "I want you to become yourself." He swallowed. "I don't know who that is." "That's your work," I said. "Not mine." We sat for a long time after the paperwork. He told me small, stupid stories about the condo. The leaking faucet he never called about because he couldn't stand hearing the super sigh on the phone, the dog downstairs that barked like a smoker. He told me Sloane had a way of changing the subject the second she lost it. He told me he thought babies would fix things, and that was a terrifying sentence he couldn't believe lived in his mouth. He told me he was going to sleep on a friend's couch and find a job that felt like work, not like a performance. He told me he'd see a therapist who didn't think manifesting was a plan. When he left, he hugged me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't healing. It was a human thing to do at the end of a hard hour. I let him. I watched him walk to the elevator and felt the unspooling of something tight and old in my belly. That night, I walked down to the dock. The air smelled like wood and wet, like always. I heard the soft slap of water on pilings and thought about all the ways mothers are asked to be oceans. To be wide enough, deep enough, forgiving enough. Always. I thought, I can be a lake. A lake is still water. A lake can refuse a boat. The phone rang while I was on the dock. Unknown number. "Miss Hart," a voice said, official and careful. "This is Detective Morales with Clearwater PD. I wanted to let you know we've moved your information to our cold case unit. No promises. But sometimes the right kind of attention wakes old facts." "Thank you," I said, and realized how often I say it now, how it has become a liturgy. When I went back inside, the house didn't echo anymore. It sounded like it did before I convinced myself that money could make me loved. It sounded like coffee in the morning, and lemon oil on wood, and the freight train on the far tracks at 2 a.m. It sounded like a life. Winter receded in sheets. Seattle does that. One morning you notice the light sits higher on the kitchen tile, and realize you survived another season almost by accident. I filled a vase with daffodils because they look like trumpets, and I wanted something in the house to announce the obvious. I was still here. On a Tuesday I met with my accountant and signed papers that made my life simpler. Auto-pays that didn't depend on anyone's memory of me. Accounts layered in ways that made it boring to try to steal. I sent Marisol to see her sister in Yakima for a long weekend on my dime, because love must flow somewhere. I told Terrell to take his daughter to Disneyland because kids deserve to stand in front of something that's built to delight them. He sent a photo of Ava in mouse ears eating a pretzel bigger than her face. I printed it and put it on the fridge. I started a small fund in my company's name. Not the old company, the new one I registered with Janelle's help. The Stillwater Foundation. It gives microgrants to older adults navigating legal nonsense that drains the soul. P.O. boxes, courier fees, mobile notaries, the dumb, small stuff that prevents big harm. I named the first grant after Dr. Romero because I wanted him to blush. Sloane's name started to show up in places she couldn't curate. A docket. A warrant list. A column that didn't say her name but said enough. I didn't save the links. I didn't need to. Some days I felt the old fury rise in me like a fever. On those days I walked the ridge behind the house until my breath hurt, and I felt more animal than anger. Nathan came on Sundays sometimes. He brought bagels and humility and updates from therapy like a dog dropping a ball at my feet. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for responsibility. He paid the first installment on the restitution check with a cashier's check, and a look I recognized from his first job when he brought home cash tips and spread them out on the table like treasure. We didn't talk about Sloan. We didn't talk about Thanksgiving. We did talk about a movie he liked, and the way the rain felt different in Seattle than in Georgia, and the time he fell off his bike at 7, and I ran 2 blocks in socks to scoop him up. We talked about whether people can change, and what counts as proof. We talked about the price of eggs and the ridiculousness of adulthood. We laughed, because laughing is the sound forgiveness might make when it is still considering whether to exist. One night, I found the pair of black heels I'd hidden in the laundry room the first week. I took them down. I looked at them. Glossy, arrogant, empty. I put them in a donation bag and wrote in Sharpie across the paper, "Not my size." I set the bag on the porch and hoped some 22-year-old headed to an interview would own the room in them and insist on every dollar she deserved. On the first warm day of spring, I set a small table on the terrace with 2 plates. Blue. I put a bowl of cherries between them because I'm sentimental, and also because cherries taste like yes. I poured 2 glasses of decent Pinot and raised one into the wind. "To women who are not easily moved," I said to the lake. "To men who learn. To the man who loved me the way a good house does. Shelter first, beauty second. To the workers who keep us alive. To the person I am at 63, which is not diminished, not confused, not done." I drank. I let the sun touch my face. I let the old ache flex and settle, and become muscle. There is a world where I never stopped sending money, where I kept confusing giving with loving until the end. There is a world where I caved to a notarized lie. There is a world where my Thanksgiving table stayed set for ghosts. That isn't this world. In this world, I bought a ridiculous cake on a Tuesday because cakes are allowed to be divorced from occasions. I called Nadia and told her the foundation had its first applicant approved. I sent Marisol home early and did my own dishes to remember what clean feels like in my hands. I texted Terrell a photo of the lake, and he sent back one of the freeway at sunset. Red tail lights like beads on a string. I slept with the window cracked and dreamed of nothing remarkable, which is another way to say peace. And when the night got very quiet and I wondered if I should have done more or less or differently, I thought of 3 words that still make the air change when I say them. Not "they found arsenic." These. I chose me,